Welcome back to Health Bite, the podcast where I offer essential nutrients for physical, mental, emotional, and professional health and well-being. 6.7 million people aged 65 and older in the United States are living with Alzheimer's disease, a number that's expected to grow by 13.8 million in 2060, according to the Alzheimer's Association. And Alzheimer's disease is the fifth leading cause of death in this age group. But what about how they are living? As a physician, health and well-being advocate, and a daughter of someone who's living with Alzheimer's, that's really what I care about, how to live well. And today on the podcast, I have someone who is exceptionally suited to speak to that piece. Dr. Gregory Nelson is a speaker, author, coach, professional musician, and an expert on leadership, culture, and transformation who has shifted his attention to advocacy after he himself was diagnosed with early stage Alzheimer's. Whether you are personally dealing with cognitive decline or have someone in your life who is, or if you're navigating aging, a health issue, or even a life challenge, this conversation is not one you'll want to miss. Learned about Dr. Gregory on LinkedIn, actually. Your posts were truly beautiful, vulnerable, where you share so elegantly how you are navigating this diagnosis. And as I mentioned before we started recording, I really am honored to have you here on this conversation and to share you with my listeners. So welcome.
Thank you. Wow, that's awfully good words that you're using there. No, it's nice to be here. Nice to be able to be with you today.
It's wonderful to have you. We're going to get into some of this, but this is something, as I mentioned in the intro, that is so very common. So many people right now are either dealing with a personal diagnosis, they're navigating this diagnosis, whether it's Alzheimer's or cognitive decline in some fashion in a loved one. And many of us are at risk, whether we have family members who are affected, as I do, or the lifestyle, or the very many factors that we don't even recognize. So this conversation is really, I think, important to all of us.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, when I started writing posts, it was so fascinating for me to see the comments that came in. And I think that word hunger that you and I were talking about at the beginning. Yeah, I think that is just so exactly what most people are. They're wanting something that feeds their soul. And then if they have something like, I will tell you, the worst word I ever wanted to hear, it came to be the very word for me, and that was Alzheimer's. I said, no way, I'm not going to have that. Even though my dad died from dementia, I said, I cannot have that word. And then I got it. And it was really, it shifted my whole world. And so I felt that hunger also. So that's kind of what I'm all about. I'll go as long as I can, and we'll see what happens. But it's been quite a journey. And so my wife Shasta and I have worked together because she ultimately will become a caregiver. Hopefully, it will be for me. But yeah, so we decided we would do it together, and she would take it sometimes, and then I would have it another times. So we're trying to just create a system, a process, or whatever that would be very useful to those who are either caregivers or who are patients with Alzheimer's. There's a lot to be said there.
Absolutely. And I really think, just having had a taste of the work that you're doing, that your work is going to be so transformative for people who are navigating this. And I want to get into that. But before we get there, can you just talk a little bit about kind of what you were doing before you received this diagnosis? Kind of like set us up
Yes.
where you were at in your
Okay.
life.
Yeah, boy, that's a big one for me too. I had always said to myself, I do not want to retire. I'm going to just keep going, doing all the work that I was doing. Well, I've been a leadership person. I've worked with Amazon and Fitbit and all these big tech companies and other organizations, including some hospitals. So it was such a wonderful experience for me to have that kind of audience. So it was it just fed my soul in that sense. So I didn't want that one word, but it finally came. And there's sort of it started a year ago, and I can go through that if you want to at some point. But my emphasis has been self-awareness. I help the leaders develop their self-awareness. And it's funny because the research shows that 80% of the leaders say they are self-aware, and yet the reality is only 15% of those people are really self-aware. So it's one of those things that leaders especially, they have to understand themselves. And so that's what I have always done with leaders and then their teams and things like that. So that's been my background.
It's interesting, that so many of these things that we talk about, like managing your reactivity is something that I talk about through mind body skills, right? Or being self aware or emotionally fluent, right? It's all good and well until you're
Yes.
faced with a doozy yourself, right?
Yeah.
I'm curious how the trajectory was for you. And before you start, I mean, I want to share that
Yeah.
my father is a double PhD,
Excellent.
and
Excellent.
he is the one who is diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease. And to your point, I mean, I think similar to you, like his brain was his mecca of,
Yes.
he was willing, I think, to receive any diagnosis on the planet and to
Yeah.
not hear that, not hear dementia, not hear
Mm,
Alzheimer's disease.
mm,
I remember navigating that. I was on the Zoom call. This happened during COVID. And so I
mm,
remember the physician going over the scan,
mhm,
over Zoom. I remember
mhm.
the sadness. I remember the grief. I remember the anger. And so, can you take us through that? Like, how did you get to this place of such
Yeah.
emotional, I mean, maturity around this?
Yeah, there comes a point where you have to, it's one of the stages, it's in later moment, but accepting, we have to come to that point. And I had a hard time. I understand what your dad went through because man, I mean, it got me so big. I didn't know what in the world. And because communication was my whole thing. So was a really tough one, but it was really interesting. And I really thank my wife for Shasta for this because it was a year ago, May, where she stopped me here in the house and said, "There's something I need to share with you." I said, "Okay." And so she goes down this road of hearing me saying things that just didn't make any sense. And I didn't really understand that. It's like you don't want to admit it or whatever. But after we talked together, man, I began to realize, wow, she really hears me. And if she's hearing that, then it's got to be. So that was the beginning of that whole process. She talked to me, and I acknowledged that she was right. And I said, okay, so let's talk about how do we deal with this? So that summer, we discovered that UC Davis has this department called for healthy aging. And so they had their neuropsychologists. And so I talked to my primary physician and I said, "Can you?" I guess I forget exactly how I asked it for him, but he said, "No, that's a good thing. Do it." Because he was from UC Davis too. So he said, okay, all of that to say, I went to the exam, thought for sure that was 3 hours of, psychological exam. I said, man, I'm going to fail this whole thing because it's so big. But I did it. And at the end, they said, you know what? Your diagnosis for you at this stage is MCI, mild cognitive impairment. He said, that's what we see because I'd already taken an MRI. And so they were looking at that picture too. And they said, yeah, so this is the early stage. But they didn't say anything about Alzheimer's. They just said, this is MCI. And then from there on, I got a neurologist and he started working with me. It was then I mean, this guy was so busy. It was a miracle I had a session with him, but he was really good and, and asked me questions. And it wasn't until February of the next year
Wow.
that actually I got a session with him. And then he said, I think we need a PET scan. It's better than the MRI. So let's get a PET scan. I got the PET scan. A week later, he called me and he said, "You've got the whole thing." My brain, I go, "Oh, is this for real? To tell me that you're not really meaning this?" And he said, "No, it's all there." And he showed me the picture and everything. And so, and then we've gone from there. But that's how it all
So
came about.
your wife brought some things to your attention, but did you have like an inkling before that? Did you have any moments where you're like, what's going on?
Yeah, that is a good point. I was doing a major speaking thing for 11 months. So I had to do this thing. And it was interesting for me to notice that every once in a while I would lose a word, but at some point, as we age, that's going to happen anyway, type of thing. So that was my evaluation, but I began to see it at the end of that 11 months where when that whole thing was done. I thought, yeah, this is a big deal, and I think she's right. So I didn't see a lot of it, but it was enough for me to know that Shasta was being right in
Yeah.
all that.
Yeah.
So I knew some things by myself, but then it took her to give me the bigger picture.
Yeah, you're incredibly articulate with me now, but really more, I'm even referring to the kind of pieces that you write that are just, again, so moving and so eloquent. You know, that somebody who has the people wouldn't expect someone that has Alzheimer's would be so articulate,
Yes.
so eloquent. You know, it's like so many things, right? We have so many
Yeah.
misconceptions about, right? So,
Yeah.
what are some common misconceptions that you think people have about Alzheimer's disease, especially in the early stages?
Well, this is really interesting to me because doing all these posts and all these really hundreds of people have commented. And so I've read them all, trying to see is there a thread that goes through this whole thing. And sure enough, it's the idea that when people get Alzheimer's, they immediately go to a place of shame. So that shame they don't want to share. I've had more women, for example, write me and say, "My mom told me that I should not tell anybody that she has this." That has gone over and over again multiple times. And so I started thinking of that. I said, shame. I mean, the whole point of this is we're on a human journey. Some of us have Alzheimer's, other of us don't, but we're still on a human journey. So what's the point? Well, who cares? There's no shame on this thing. You didn't cause it. I didn't cause it, but there it is. So that's been a huge piece for me as I write these things. And by the way, it takes a long time for me. I mean, I'm like sitting at a white page and I'm trying to think all these things. I have words that I have to look up and, on this kind of a thing. But man, I'm telling you, there's so much shame on this. There's a fear. So
Yeah.
that also a fear. What is this going to do to me? Are people going to not, I mean, who are working still have a really tough time because they're afraid the moment that comes out. And I'll tell you, Adrienne, man, when I did the first post in LinkedIn, I just said, okay, this is my death. Man, when people find out that I'm having Alzheimer's, I said, this is going to ruin everything. But you know what? It was the exact opposite. It was amazing to me. And that tells me that we need to be open with each other because we actually get more support when we are honest and vulnerable than we are trying to hide everything.
Absolutely.
So
When you hearing you talk about shame, it makes me think about, this concept of hunger that I speak about. And I see this in my practice, when it comes to weight loss or excess weight and kind of the emotional or spiritual hunger that is beneath that, which are universal, by the way. So like whether we
yeah,
are
yeah,
overweight or not, We all hunger for connection. We all hunger for validation, right? And that comes with so much shame. And so I'm curious, like, did you ever feel the shame? And, if so, how did you navigate that? How did you come out from under that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the shame came at the very first part, not in the diagnosis, because that was from the neurologist, and I didn't tell anybody about that. It took a few months to try to get that going. So that first post, that was a scary thing for me, and there was some feeling of shame. What are they going to think? But I realized in the end it worked. It was okay. So I didn't go past that with shame.
It's
I
almost
was lucky enough. Yeah.
It's almost as if, you took that vulnerable first step, that scary first step, and then in the response, you were reassured by the commonality of this experience. And again, I think this is such an important discussion, whether we are talking about Alzheimer's or anything for that matter, right? Because again,
Yeah. Yeah.
the feelings, the experiences are universal, irrespective of the challenge that one is
Yes.
experiencing.
That's so true. That's so true. Part of what motivated me to just dive in was my dad. He had dementia that he had never diagnosed. So it was dementia of some kind, but he was silent the whole time. We never, as kids, got to ask him questions like, "Hey, Dad, what is it feeling like for you? And what can we do to help you?" He was just completely silent on that until he died.
Mm.
And I said, when this came through, and my diagnosis of Alzheimer's, I said, I'm not going to do that. I just can't allow myself to do that. I want to actually talk to people and open up this thing so we can do this more, because that's the only way we can get support. And at some point along the way, I'd love to share what I did with my family, but it just opens up things that is so much better.
Share. I'd love to hear what you did with your family.
Well, it was the first thing I did was I talked to my siblings. I talked to my kids. I have three kids. With those, I did one-to-one with my siblings, but then my kids, they knew that there was stuff happening since the summer before, because I told them all about my, neuropsychologists and all this thing. So they knew that I had MCI, but
Mm.
they didn't know I didn't know until February of this year. So after that, I called them up. I texted them and said, let's do a Zoom together. And so they all came, the three of them. And I think, pretty much knew what I was going to say. So I said, well, guys, this is Alzheimer's. It's the real deal. We just all cried together there
Yeah.
on the Zoom call. And then they had a lot of questions, and so they asked a lot of things. And it was a wonderful conversation. But man, I'm telling you, they just I don't even know the right word, because after that they knew where I was going. They knew that somewhere along the line it was going to be a hard time. So they have been so loving to me. I mean, it's just amazing to me. It's amazing.
Greg, your openness though has invited that, right? Because to your
Yes.
point, maybe it's not your experience with your father, for example.
Yes.
You weren't
Right.
you weren't given that opportunity,
Yes.
right? And so
Yes.
I think something that again it echoes what we were saying before in regards to shame, but something that I really want to highlight for those who are listening is that this openness, this ability to be vulnerable, this ability to meet that fear is precisely what is needed in order to save yourself,
Yes.
so that you have that support, but also
Yes.
you're doing it in service of the people around you. You're giving them the
Yes.
opportunity, right?
Yes.
To also express their feelings and to be the kind of partner, child, coworker, human that they
Yes.
want alongside you.
Yeah. That's a beautiful way to put it. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. That's exactly it.
Can you share if you, again, I'm baffled by your groundedness. Can you
Mm.
share if you have a practice? What? Do you
Yes.
meditate? Do you
Yeah.
What do you do to keep yourself kind of grounded and attuned and aligned to what sounds like is a mission to
Hmm.
maintain the
Hmm.
self-awareness and to really
Hmm.
navigate this with that level of emotional fluency?
Yeah, that's really an important issue. And with Shasta and me, we start the morning reading together, some meditation, and the biggest thing is gratitude. So we have our app in our phones and we just write these things down and then share with each other. And it's such a great thing, which really leads me to what my sort of mantra is, and that is I am grateful today.
Mm.
That's it. I'm grateful for today. When I wake up, I feel my arms and say, okay, they're all in. Okay, yeah, I can stand up. All right, that's all good. Okay, today is a good day. I'm grateful. and, I'm not like that all the time. I mean, I have some down moments that are very down for me, but man, that's human too. So
Absolutely.
I'm not ashamed of that at all. This is what we go through. We go in and out, up and down. Anyway, those are some of the rituals that we do that are so helpful to both of us.
Yeah, I love that. Starting the day with reading and gratitude. Are there any other changes that you've made in your day-to-day life of, I don't know, food, movement, other
Yeah. Okay.
rituals?
That's great. Yes, as a matter of fact, we have talked to a number of functional medicine people.
Mm.
We've talked to nutritionists. There was the one that one of the doctors sent us to, and this was this woman in Scotland, of all
Wow.
places.
Mm.
So we had a session with her, and she talked about all the nutrition and things like that. We found a gym within walking distance of our house here in Grass Valley in Northern California. And so we now go to the gym because we all know that as people age, they need stronger muscles so that, if you fall down, you don't break a bone. So I'm out there, and that's been really, really meaningful to us. Pickleball is a wonderful thing, man. I love that game. So does Shasta. So that's all good. So it's those kinds of things. Exercise is important for us. We walk a lot, and so is that the kind of thing you're thinking
Yeah,
of?
yeah. It's interesting because you talk about exercise, but what I hear coming through your words still is tying it back to, or this tie that you have to
Yeah,
connection, right?
yeah. Good point.
It's the gym with your wife. It's pickleball,
Yes,
which is inherently not done
yes,
solo, but with connection. It feels as though that connection is kind of like a core value that
yes, yes,
exudes out of
yes,
everything that you're doing,
yes.
then going to the gym, right?
You've nailed it. And if I can expand that even a little more, the other connection are the connections with the people closest to us. So it started with Shasta, then it went to my siblings, then it went to my kids, then it went to my best friends. I'm on the phone with them every week, about an hour and a half with each of them. And then we have other friends also that were close enough to us. So they all know about my journey. And they've all said, what can we do to help you? I mean, this is a group, we're talking about a big group of people, and they really want to be supportive. It would never have happened had I not opened up with these people. And but that's the connection that Shasta and I really value. Connect with that. And so it's been a really helpful thing.
Do you feel like, I'm not sure that I believe the statement that everything happens for a reason.
Yeah, I hear you.
What I do believe, though, is that we're meaning-making creatures, right?
Yes,
Like we are successful as humans when we can use our experiences, particularly our trials and tribulations, in a way that is meaningful and in a way that gives us a sense of purpose. But do you feel like on some level this diagnosis for you, and particularly this diagnosis, right? Like this is not
yes,
cancer. This is for
yes.
someone who's like my father, your mecca, your professional
Jeez.
life, like is your brain. That's like your product.
Yes, yes.
Do you wonder, like, was this meant to
I was very angry to God. I can tell you that when I first got all this, I was thinking, come on, man, this is so unfair. Why do I get this? So I went through that process for sure and realized that I just think that things happen. I mean, we can't stop it. Some things we can stop, but not everything. And so the idea of, yeah, this is comes from God is not the thing for me.
Yeah.
I'm not, I just don't think God would do something like that. But here's what I have found about this whole thing for me.
Mm.
And that is, in fact, I'm going to do a post on this because it's so meaningful to me. But it's the idea that, self-awareness, isn't that ironic? That's what I've been teaching the whole time. And now I'm getting it for myself. Okay, Greg, what do you know about yourself that you haven't known before? Well, man, I was reading this one thing, and the author said, going down this road helps you to become who you really are in this chapter. In this chapter, not your whole life, but in this chapter. And I started thinking about that, and I think, man, there's really something to that, because what this difficult journey is doing is really sort of smoothing out parts of me that I needed to have, kind of smoothed out in some respects. Does that make sense at all? It's really kind of an interesting thing, because we look immediately at the pain stuff and we say, this is terrible. But then if we go past that, we start finding out, wow, actually, here's what I can do as a result of, like this. I would never be heard with people in Alzheimer's. I would never be heard if I didn't have Alzheimer's. There's no way. I would be doing all my other work all the time. But now it has given me an opportunity to be a part of that community. I'm not better than anyone else. I'm just as much as everyone else that has it. And someday that's going to be even worse for me. And I know that. But that understanding and the sense of community, man, I mean, that's pretty powerful.
It,
I
it,
mean, that's the way I look at it.
it absolutely is. And, we have all these cliches around these ideas like the only way out is through or what have you, right?
Yeah.
But I mean, you're really describing the process so granularly of how you're
Mm,
doing that, and again tying it to this kind of greater sense of purpose. You
yes.
said something that made me think of just being present. I think one of the challenges with this diagnosis is like the what ifs.
Uh-huh.
And quite frankly, with everything, right? Like
Yeah.
catastrophizing, and it could be health related, or it can be, I've been very open on this podcast and in all of my platforms
Mm,
on the impact of October 7th on my life as a Jewish woman, as a Jewish mother,
mm.
and the rise of anti-Semitism in the United States,
Oh,
right?
yes.
And
Yeah.
at the beginning of all this, I had these what if I won't see it in my lifetime, but what about my children? What are they going to experience? What if something like the
Yeah.
Holocaust happened? Like, what if, right? And it's
Yeah.
this catastrophizing that just adds a
Yes.
layer of turmoil. It's like insult to injury.
Yeah.
I mean, how does that land? How do you stay present? Do you have
Yeah.
your own
Yeah.
version
Yeah.
of catastrophizing? And how do you, I mean, you clearly walk yourself away from that.
Mhm. Beautiful way that you're talking about it, Adrian. It's beautiful what you're saying. And I'm with you on that 100%. It's a very difficult process for me, for this reason. It's when I have this, I don't know if well, one of my strengths is futuristic.
Mm.
I'm always looking down the road. And I realized that's going to kill me. I mean, in terms of right now, if I go too far into the future, it will bring me down so strong, I might stay down, and I don't want to stay down. So, what I've done is another sort of mantra for me is one day at a time, one day at a time. Everybody, I mean, that's not a one that's really I mean, everybody says these things, but this one is so important for me. I just wake up in the morning, I start doing things, and I am sort of deceived into looking ahead because I want to know. I want to know, what is going to happen to me. And then I finally realize, no, Greg, you can't go down that road. Yeah, you'll get there, but why live in the future when you know the future is going to be bad? Why not live in the now where things are okay? I mean, we're doing the best we can and blah, blah, blah. So that's what is really, I mean, I have to admit it's very hard to do that all the time. But the times when I really do it, man, it saves me.
This is like the curse of, I think, the particularly type A professionals. I'm gonna lump us both into that bucket, is that being goal oriented means that you're
Mhm.
constantly planning for the future.
Yes, yes,
And yet, whether, again, you're dealing with a difficult diagnosis or not, future thinking is the bane of all of us. I mean, being
yeah,
present really is the only way to be. And so
yes,
I want to come back to this point of like not being Pollyannish about it all.
yes, yes, yes,
You are being forced, and we are all in our own ways, in our own lives,
yes.
forced to live out these cliches that you mentioned, right? Which aren't
Mhm.
actually cliched. I mean, when
Yeah.
push comes to shove, it is a measure of a life well lived. The ability
Mm,
to do these things, to be present, is
mhm.
probably, number one in terms
Yeah.
of living a life well lived.
Yeah, I think that really hooks into gratitude. Gratitude is about something that you have in this moment, and then we can go backwards too, because that's sometimes what we do in our gratitude. Oh yeah, last week we did. Oh man, I'm grateful for. But your point is well made. I mean, and that keeps us sort of in the now. And we can, I mean, people can go down the road as much as they want to go. But I tell you, that's a hard way to go. I mean, at some point, you got to say, all right, but we don't even know. We can assume what's going to happen in a year, but we don't know for sure. And I tell you what, Adrienne, I thought for sure I wasn't going to have Alzheimer's. I mean, she and I did the 23andMe. It was like 12 years ago or whatever they started that thing. And I wanted to do it because I wanted to know, do I have this genetic thing? And I saw one, APOE, and I said, oh, yeah, but they're saying this, if you have one, maybe 20%. But if you have two, that's like 65% or something. Well, I had one, and there it was in this diagnosis, man. And I died. I wasn't planning on that for sure.
The thought of it, I think about 23andMe. The thought of it freaks me out.
I know
I've
that.
toyed with this idea, right? Because, again, because of my dad, would I want to know? And I've decided for myself personally, unless there's something actionable,
Right,
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 that I don't
right.
need to know my fate. I can just engage in the
Yeah,
practices that I know are helpful to me,
yeah,
body and soul, the kinds of practices we talk
yes,
about on this
yes.
podcast, and let the
Beautiful.
rest kind of make itself known
Yeah.
when needed.
Yeah, what's so interesting is these experts on Alzheimer's are saying that the earlier we get the diagnosis, the better it is for us because then we can actually be a part of something that could help us do it. And now they're saying people in 30s and 40s ought to have some kind of a diagnosis. And if it just is zero, well, perfect. If not, then they said, I did it when I was 69. This year was 70 for me. So 69, my neurologist said, congratulations on starting so early,
Mm.
because this gives us an opportunity to kind of help guide you into the right things. So, it's a different way to look at it. But he said to me when the diagnosis came, he said, I would imagine I pretty much could put money down that you've had this 10 years ago. So that's the kind of thing we're dealing with.
Right. And I think that goes back to kind of the misconceptions of early stage disease and also, how it can be actionable to your point, how it
Yeah,
can be
yeah,
actionable in changing the trajectory.
Yeah.
I think, Greg, we've already kind of touched on this, but as we close, I want to ask you this question, and this has been lovely, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
How has this changed your sense of purpose, and what are you hoping to achieve in your on your platform and
Mhm.
otherwise going forward?
Yeah, I will have to admit that this purpose that I was brought into. I mean, I would never have thought about this. Well, let me do some posts to people who have Alzheimer's. I mean, I would never have done that. But so interesting that it there was just this deep sense inside me that I wanted to be a part of being a part of the community. And maybe I have some things that might be useful, maybe not, but I'm going to try and we'll see. And that kind of a thing. It gave me a new sense of purpose. And then I came up with my self-awareness word and I go, but yeah, that's actually what I'm supposed to be doing. For me, I need to be self-aware. And others, everybody needs to be self-aware. So let's talk about how do we do that? How do we get there? So that has been really helpful. I can honestly say that I look back with nostalgia with my work. I miss that. And that's okay because it was good and I had a really good time. And I made some differences, through the years. So there's my gratitude part to look back and say, wow, okay, that was good. I had a good life. If I go tomorrow, that's okay because I've had a good life. Let's just go day by day. That's the way I look at it.
Well, I just want to echo that you are doing incredible work for people who need it. When I saw one of your posts pop up, I think I was having insomnia, Greg, and I think it was like
Yeah.
2 a.m. and I saw one of
Yeah.
your posts and I was moved to tears. I got
Mm,
so emotional by the beauty of your words. And I had a full day at home.
mm.
I work in the office a few days a week with patients clinically, and then I have my home days where I do my creative work. And I just cleared my schedule and went and spent the day with my dad.
So good.
And that was your doing. That was your prompt.
Wow.
And so I just want to say from my end that you really are extraordinary and you really
Mm.
are doing beautiful, important work. Alzheimer's or not, I believe that you are exactly where we need you. So I want to thank you for
Wow.
that.
Man, Adrian, that you have no idea how much that means to me. Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah.
I'm going to end with, I pulled up your LinkedIn profile and I'm not sure if this was, there's so much goodness, but I just want to end with this one thing that you wrote. And I
Yeah.
encourage people to find you on LinkedIn as well, under Dr. Gregory Nelson. You write here, I want to keep, and this is in the context of you sharing, your story, your diagnosis,
Okay.
and sharing that with others. And so you say, in the coming weeks, I'll share more about my diagnosis, symptoms, treatments, and practical tools I'm finding helpful. But before I share those details, I wanted to begin with the why. I want to keep showing up. I want to keep gathering people around me. I want to tell the truth about this journey, the funny moments, the frustrating ones, the vulnerable questions. Because if I don't, I fear I'll look up one day and realize I disappeared long before I was actually gone.
Man, wow.
Thank you for being here,
Yeah.
Greg.
Oh, thank
Genuinely,
you, Adrian.
wholeheartedly appreciate this conversation.
Good.
I hope my listeners will share this episode widely. I think
Mm,
again the impact of your message is inspiring, beyond cognitive decline, and I think it's a valuable message for all.
mm,
So thank you
mm.
again for being.
Thank you for having me, Adrian. That's wonderful.